I used to think conspiracy theories were just noise, a distraction, a way to give meaning to the meaningless. But then I was hired to edit some raw concert footage for a private client. Nothing fancy, just clean up the audio, sharpen the visuals. The artist? Eminem. But what I found buried in those files, it wasn't just weird. It wasn't just off. It was inhuman. And the deeper I dug, the more I realized this wasn't just about one video or one artist. This was about what's been watching us all along. It started with a strange email from a freelance agency I hadn't worked with in over a year. No subject, just a time, a link, and a single line. Can you clean this up by morning? The footage was raw, unlisted, and watermarked in a way that told me it wasn't meant to circulate publicly. It was labeled M Live Archive 117-B. I opened it expecting shaky concert shots or a badly mixed rehearsal clip. What I got instead was a static wide-angle feed of a dimly lit stage. No crowd, no sound, no energy. Just Eminem, alone under a spotlight, rehearsing what looked like a stripped-down performance of Not Afraid. Only something felt wrong. His body moved like a puppet that had memorized the choreography too well. His posture too upright. His expression vacant. At one point, he paused mid-bar, turned his head and stared directly at the corner of the frame for 12 full seconds. I thought the feed had frozen, but the timestamp kept running. When I stepped frame by frame through the moment, I saw his pupils dilate unnaturally wide. And then, without blinking, he whispered something. But no audio came through. I tried boosting the levels. Nothing. Just a soft electrical whine, like air escaping through a vent deep underground. When I went back to rewatch that section, the file corrupted. Not the whole thing, just the timestamp. It skipped, jumped back, then forward. And the face on screen, it looked different. Not makeup, not age. More like someone wearing his skin, but not knowing how to make it move right. After that, I got curious. I pulled some older files from my personal backup drive. I'd done mixing work on a few interlude tracks from M's revival tour years ago. At the time, I thought they were just audio bridges. Ambient noise, city sounds, loops of fan chatter used to stitch transitions. But now, listening again with fresh ears, I found something I hadn't caught back then. Beneath the crowd noise, buried in the static, was a hum. Not feedback, not low-end rumble. It had structure, a rhythm, like slow breathing played in reverse. I ran it through my analyzer software, separating out the layers. It pulsed at 17 hertz, below the threshold of human hearing. Known as the ghost frequency, it's the one most commonly associated with fear responses. Goosebumps, anxiety, nausea. Why was it there? Out of curiosity, I cross-referenced it with other performances. Venom, Godzilla, even a GQ interview. Everyone had the same trace of that tone. Subtle, but present. I remembered reading about infrasound years ago. Scientists used it to explain hauntings, how certain frequencies could create the illusion of a presence in the room, how they could make people believe they were being watched. I realized what I was hearing wasn't a coincidence. Someone had embedded this into his media. Not once, systematically. It wasn't artistic. It was intentional. And that's when the memory hit me. Hard. The hum. The stillness. The stare that breaks the fourth wall without breaking character. I'd heard all of it before. years ago, in a different room, with different people, but the same feeling. I'd never talked about that night. Not once. Not to family, not to friends, but I couldn't ignore it anymore. The year was 2015. I was hired by a man I thought would be just another eccentric legend with weird requests and a tighter NDA. That man was Prince, but he wasn't looking for a sound engineer. He was looking for a witness. He didn't say it outright. He didn't need to. When I arrived at Paisley Park, I was ushered through a hallway I didn't know existed, behind a false wall, past a locked stairwell, down to a room that buzzed with surveillance feeds. Prince sat in the middle of it all, legs folded, drinking tea, calm, watching. He motioned to the screen. "Tonight," he said, "you'll see what the industry really runs on." One by one, the cameras showed black SUVs rolling up to the gates. Not flashy, no red carpet, just tinted windows and celebrities stepping out with their heads down. Their security teams weren't allowed inside. Prince had made that clear. This wasn't a party. This wasn't a photo shoot. This was invitation only. And whatever was going to happen, it would happen without outside eyes. Except for ours. The feed labeled Room 19 lit up. It was a small circular room. Velvet walls, no windows. A chandelier that didn't belong in any modern home. Just a rug in the center, and a single locked camera angle hanging from the ceiling like a fly on a wire. And then Diddy walked in. He paced like he was searching for something, dragged his hand along the walls like he was reading them. Then he stopped, not in the center, not by the rug, but in front of the exact spot where the hidden camera had been wired. He stared for 13 seconds, unblinking, like he knew. Then he said, low and humming, "This is the spot." I remember gripping the mixing board like it might protect me. The waveform wasn't flatlining, but it wasn't behaving normally either. There was no ambient noise, no electrical hum, just presence. Like the room itself was holding its breath. Prince, barely moving, whispered, "Watch what they do when they think no one's watching." And what they did still haunts me. Room 19 wasn't designed for sound. There were no speakers, no vents, no electrical buzz. Just walls padded in red velvet and a rug in the center that seemed more decorative than intentional, until the oil started dripping. At first, the guests entered slowly, heads bowed as if attending a service they didn't fully understand, or one they understood too well. Diddy led them in. Behind him came moguls, pop icons, a former teen idol still clinging to his brand. But none of them spoke. They didn't take out phones. They didn't greet each other. They just assembled. The audio feed glitched the moment the last person entered. Our levels dropped to 0, but I knew the hardware was fine. What filled that silence wasn't nothing. It was something we couldn't translate. Mark, the video tech, began whispering timestamps to himself like he was trying to memorize them before they vanished. I had the gain knobs dialed as high as they'd go, but what came through was quieter than breath, and twice as alive. The preacher was the first to move. He stepped into the center of the circle, eyes shut, shoulders slack. He undressed without being told. First his blazer, then his shirt, folded neatly and placed on a velvet stool. He dropped to his knees like he was kneeling before an altar. No hesitation, just ritual. And then the oil came out. Thick, golden, cold-looking, poured into Diddy's hands and rubbed between his palms like someone washing in holy water. But this wasn't a blessing. This was preparation. They moved one by one. Each person took turns rubbing oil into the preacher's skin. Not sensually, not carelessly, but methodically. It wasn't a massage. It was anointing. By the time the final guest stepped forward, the preacher's skin gleamed like glass. His eyes rolled back, lips parted in silent prayer or surrender. The chanting started soft, a hum at first, then vowels, then something darker. And beneath it all, that hum returned. I recognized it instantly. The same hum I'd found layered beneath Eminem's vocals. The same pattern I once wrote off as a mistake in the mastering phase. But this time, I could feel it in real time, like a second heartbeat vibrating through the console. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't digital. It was wet, organic, like breath echoing from the bottom of a sewer drain. Mark began sweating profusely. His hands trembled as he tried to stabilize the camera feeds. "It's interfering," he mumbled. But I wasn't sure if he meant the signal or something else. Then he gasped. His headphones hit the floor. He staggered back, hand over his mouth, and vomited onto the floor beside the power rack. He couldn't hear it anymore. But I could. I began isolating the frequency manually, stripping away the mids and highs, narrowing the field until the waveform collapsed into a single pulsing line that shouldn't have existed. Vocal cords can't make that sound. No machine I know can either. And still, the chanting grew louder. In room 19, the preacher began to tremble. Oil pooled beneath his knees. One woman began pouring the liquid into his open mouth. Another leaned in and whispered into his ear. Not in English, not in any known dialect, but in a language that made my molars ache. The chandelier above them swayed gently, not side to side, but in a perfect clockwise rotation. No air vents, no fans, just motion. The oil shimmered under the flickering candlelight, shadows blooming like ink stains across the walls. One man began spinning in place. A woman sobbed and started laughing, scream laughter that had no rhythm. Another guest fell to the floor and began speaking in tongues. Their movements, haphazard and chaotic, still somehow synced with that hum, like it was guiding them, feeding on them. And that's when I realized this wasn't a summoning, it was a transmission. Something was using them as conduits. Something old. Something that didn't enter the room, but instead came through it. The chandelier's motion stopped abruptly. The candles flared for a moment, then flickered out. Total darkness filled room 19. Yet the video feed remained crystal clear. Infrared number. We didn't install that. Prints had been explicit. Only natural light. But what I saw on screen wasn't just shadows. The guests were still, standing shoulder to shoulder, motionless and soaked in oil. Their eyes looked vacant, glassy, like something else was looking through them. Then Clive Davis stepped forward again. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Our console didn't pick up a thing. And still, the waveform moved. The signal was still transmitting. I leaned closer to the console, heart hammering, and for the briefest second, I swear I heard something under the static. A single word, not spoken, impressed, like a breath pressed into the silence between syllables. Then the camera feed flickered. Just once. And in that flicker, every guest in the room turned toward the lens. In sync, in silence, they looked straight into our surveillance system, as if they knew, as if they'd been waiting for us to look. Mark stood up so fast he knocked over his chair. He was muttering to himself, hands over his ears. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. I was stuck, frozen, locked into that screen. Prince hadn't moved the entire time. His face was still. His eyes fixed. When the guests finally turned away, Clive closed the book and walked toward the edge of the rug. The preacher remained on the floor, still convulsing, still shaking. The others filed out. No one spoke. No one looked back. And when the door to room 19 clicked shut behind them, Prince let out a long breath, like he'd been holding it since the moment the hum began. Then he turned to me and said, "You didn't flinch?" After the ritual ended, the silence in the surveillance room was louder than anything we'd heard that night. Prince stood slowly. His porcelain cup sat untouched on the edge of the desk, the tea inside cold. He pressed his palms together in front of his lips and just stood like that, thinking, maybe praying. Mark was curled up by the trash bin, knees to chest, mumbling to himself. His headset had shorted out from sweat or panic or something deeper. I sat frozen, hands still on the board, half convinced that if I let go, something would come through the wires. Then Prince finally turned to me. "We have to pack everything," he said. No emotion, no panic, just resolution. Together, we collected every drive, redundant copies, raw audio, primary feed, backup loops, everything physical, no cloud, no network. He handed me a matte black case. He'd had it ready, like he'd planned this ending all along. Then he unlocked a small door, hidden behind a bass trap panel. The room beyond was lined with lead, soundproofed, cold. I wasn't allowed inside. He sealed the box, locked the door behind it, and said, "Come back in 3 days, we'll clear the rest. We'll finish this." I nodded, but inside every nerve screamed. I just wanted to get out. Still, I owed him, because years before this, I told him about my sister, about how she'd gone to LA for a demo deal and was never heard from again. Prince didn't flinch. He didn't give me the usual, "I'm sorry." He just said, "They take the ones who shine brightest." I didn't sleep for those 3 days. I didn't turn on music. I didn't touch my computer. I left my phone on airplane mode. Every mirror in my apartment got covered in sheets because I kept thinking about the chandelier, the hum, the way every guest looked at the camera, not in surprise, but like they knew we were watching, like they wanted us to see. On the third day, I drove back to Paisley Park. It was different this time. No staff, no background music through the walls. The entire place felt drained, like the house itself had bled out. I walked down the hallway where the guests had first entered, now dark and lifeless. Every photo I passed, the plaques, the portraits, the gold records, they all looked like gravestones. The surveillance room was unlocked. The monitors were dark. The console powered off. My backup mic bag still sat in the corner where I left it. My name tag from the event hung over a broken cable. I crouched to collect my gear, trying to convince myself everything was okay. That's when I felt it. A shift in the air. like someone had stepped into the room behind me. I turned. Nothing. But something made me look to the far corner, behind the rack of unused monitors. There was a mirror. Tall, narrow, framed in black wood, coated in dust like it had been there forever. But it hadn't. I knew it hadn't. I'd been in that room every day for a week. That mirror was new. I stepped closer, slowly. The glass showed my reflection, pale, sleep-deprived, sunken. But something was off. There was a figure in the background, just at the edge of the frame, tall, still. Made of something like smoke, but too solid to be a shadow. Its eyes weren't glassy. They were real, wet, watching. I spun around. The room was empty, but when I looked back, the figure was still there. And then it tilted its head. Only slightly. Just enough to move. That was all I needed. I bolted out of the room, down the hallway, past the velvet walls and out the service entrance. I didn't stop driving until I hit the freeway. I didn't call Prince. I didn't return his messages. I didn't go back. I told myself the footage would speak for itself, that he had a plan, that the truth would find a way out. But I knew better.